The gravel crunched under my shoes as I stepped out of the car. The sound was sharp and final, like bones breaking. I stood on the side of Route 47, a nameless two-lane highway cutting through empty Kansas farmland, and watched my family drive away. My stepmother Karen didn't even look back. My half-brother Jason was laughing in the passenger seat. Through the rear window, I could see my half-sister Brittany taking a selfie, the dust cloud from the tires framing her like she was the star of some twisted road trip movie. We had just buried my father 3 hours ago. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't run after them. I just stood there in my funeral dress and practical flats, holding my purse, watching the black SUV disappear into the heat shimmer on the horizon. The silence that followed was enormous. No cars. No houses. Just wheat fields and sky and the sound of my own heartbeat. They thought they had just dumped the problem child on the side of the road. What they didn't know is that they had just made the biggest mistake of their lives. Before I tell you exactly how much that 10-minute car ride cost them, drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from right now. I want to know who's part of this community today. I checked my phone. No signal. Of course. Karen had picked this spot carefully. We were exactly 47 miles from town, far enough that walking back would take all night, remote enough that no one would randomly pass by. This wasn't impulse cruelty. This was planned. I looked down at my purse. Inside was my phone, my wallet, and a folded piece of paper I had been carrying since yesterday morning. The paper was why I was standing here. The paper was why Karen's smile at the funeral had been so tight it looked painful. The paper was a copy of my father's will. The real one. Not the fake version Karen had shown everyone last week. Let me back up. Let me tell you how a woman ends up abandoned on a Kansas highway on the day she buries her father. My name is Claire Hoffman. I'm 32 years old. I'm a certified public accountant, which means I spend my days looking at numbers that other people are trying to hide. I'm good at finding things people don't want to find. I'm even better at staying quiet while I do it. My father, Walter Hoffman, raised me alone after my mother died when I was 6. He was a farmer. 300 acres of wheat and corn in Harper County, Kansas. He wasn't rich, but he was careful. He was saved. He planned. He taught me that land was the only thing that mattered because land didn't lie. When I was 14, he married Karen. Karen was a waitress from Wichita with big blonde hair and a smile that could sell you a car you didn't need. She came with 2 kids, Jason and Brittany. Jason was 12 and mean. Brittany was 10 and spoiled. I became the outsider in my own home overnight. Karen made it clear from day one that I was tolerated, not loved. I ate dinner after everyone else. I wore hand-me-downs while Brittany got new clothes. I worked the farm every morning before school while Jason slept in. My father saw it. He didn't stop. But he saw it. I left for college at 18 and never really came back. I visited twice a year, Christmas and Dad's birthday. The visits were tense. Karen would make comments about my weight, my job, my lack of a husband. Jason would ignore me. Brittany would ask to borrow money and then roll her eyes when I said no. But I called my father every Sunday. We talked about the farm, about the weather, about nothing important. He wasn't an emotional man. He didn't say he loved me. But he always answered the phone. 3 weeks ago, he had a stroke. Massive. He was unconscious when the ambulance arrived. He died 2 days later in the ICU without waking up. Karen called me at work. Her voice was flat, efficient. Walter's gone. Funeral on Saturday. Don't bother coming early. There's nothing to do. I drove the 6 hours from my apartment in Kansas City to Harper County in silence. The radio stayed off. I didn't cry. I felt numb, like someone had wrapped my entire body in cotton and then buried it. When I arrived at the house I grew up in, Karen met me at the door. She was wearing black, but her makeup was perfect. She looked like she was going to a cocktail party, not a wake. "Oh, Claire," she said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "I'm so glad you made it. Come in. We have so much to go over." Inside, the house smelled like coffee and casserole. Neighbors had brought food. Jason was on the couch eating a sandwich. Brittany was on her phone. Neither of them looked up when I walked in. Karen led me to the kitchen table. She pulled out a folder. Your father's affairs are in order, she said. He made sure everything was clear. I wanted you to see the will before the funeral so there wouldn't be any confusion. She slid a paper across the table. I read it. According to this will, my father left everything to Karen. The house, the land, the equipment, the savings account, everything. I was listed as receiving personal effects of sentimental value only. Karen watched me read it. Her face was calm, but her eyes were bright. She was enjoying this. I know this must be hard, she said. But your father wanted to make sure I was taken care of. After all, I was his wife for 18 years. You understand. I looked at the signature at the bottom. It was my father's handwriting. But something felt wrong. The letters were too smooth, too confident. My father's hands had been shaking for the last 5 years because of arthritis. His signatures always looked wobbly, like a child learning to write. This one didn't. When did he sign this? I asked. 2 months ago, Karen said. Right after his birthday. He knew he wasn't doing well. He wanted everything settled. 2 months ago, my father could barely hold a fork. There was no way he had signed this document. But I didn't say that. I just folded the paper and put it in my purse. Okay, I said. Thank you for showing me. Karen looked surprised. She had been expecting a fight. She had been ready for tears, for accusations. My calm acceptance threw her off. You're welcome, she said slowly. I'm glad you're being mature about this. That night, I stayed in a motel in town. I didn't sleep. I sat on the bed and opened my laptop. I logged into the Harper County Land Records database. As an accountant, I had access to public property files. I pulled up my father's farm. The records showed something interesting. 3 months ago, my father had filed a transfer on death deed. It's a legal document that transfers property automatically when someone dies, bypassing the will entirely. And according to the county records, the beneficiary wasn't Karen. It was me. The farm, all 300 acres, was legally mine the moment my father died. Karen's will was irrelevant. The land didn't go through probate. It didn't get divided. It just transferred. I sat back on the motel bed and laughed. It was a short, sharp sound. My father had outmaneuvered Karen from beyond the grave. But I didn't tell anyone. Not yet. The next morning was the funeral. It was small. My father didn't have many friends. The service was at the Lutheran church in town. The pastor said nice things that weren't particularly true. Karen cried into a tissue. Jason looked bored. Brittany checked her phone. I sat in the front pew and stared at the casket. I thought about Sunday phone calls. I thought about how my father had taught me to check fence lines and read weather patterns. I thought about how he never said he loved me, but he made sure I would be okay. After the service, we went to the cemetery. They lowered the casket into the ground. I dropped a handful of dirt onto the lid. Karen dabbed at her eyes. The pastor said a final prayer. And then Karen turned to me. Claire, sweetheart, she said, her voice sugary. Jason's going to drive you back to your car. I had ridden to the funeral with them. My car was still at the motel. Okay, I said. We walked to the SUV. Karen got in the driver's seat. Jason got in the passenger side. Brittany climbed in the back. I got in next to her. Karen started driving. But she didn't drive toward town. She drove the opposite direction, out toward the empty highway. Where are we going? I asked. Shortcut, Karen said. Brittany giggled. We drove for 20 minutes. The roads got emptier. The houses disappeared. We turned onto Route 47, a straight flat road that cut through nothing. And then Karen pulled over. She put the car in park. She turned around and looked at me. Her face wasn't sad anymore. It wasn't fake. It was cold. Get out, she said. What? You heard me. Get out. Jason opened his door and got out. He opened my door from the outside. Come on, Claire. Out. I looked at Karen. You're joking. Do I look like I'm joking? She smiled. Your father's gone. You're not family anymore. You're just dead weight. So get out. Brittany was filming me on her phone. She was laughing. I got out. I stood on the gravel. Jason slammed the door. Karen leaned out the window. Good luck walking back. Maybe someone will pick you up. Maybe they won't. She put the car in drive. And they left. I watched them disappear. I stood there in the heat and the silence, and I felt something shift inside me. It wasn't anger. Anger is hot. It was cold. This was the moment when the invisible chain I had been carrying my whole life, the chain that said family is family and blood is thicker than water, just snapped. They had made a mistake. They had assumed I was powerless. They had assumed I was the same scared kid who ate dinner alone at 14. They were wrong. I pulled out my phone. No signal. I started walking. Not back toward town. Forward. There was a gas station about 5 miles ahead. I had seen it on the drive out. It took me an hour and a half. My feet blistered. My dress was soaked with sweat. But I made it. The gas station was old, the kind with 2 pumps and a clerk who looked like he had been sitting in that chair since 1987. I walked inside. The air conditioning felt like heaven. "Can I use your phone?" I asked. The clerk looked at me, this woman in a black funeral dress, covered in dust, and just handed me the landline. I called a taxi. Then I called my lawyer. The taxi took me back to the motel. I paid the driver with the last cash in my wallet. I went inside, took a shower, and changed into normal clothes. Then I sat down and made a list. Karen thought she had won. She thought she had the will, the house, and the farm. She thought I was gone. She was about to learn that underestimating a CPA is a fatal mistake. First, I needed to secure the land. The transfer on death deed was already filed, but I needed to make it official. I called the county clerk's office Monday morning. "I need to record a death certificate and finalize a TOD deed transfer," I said. The clerk was efficient. "Bring the death certificate and ID. We'll process it the same day." I drove to the courthouse. I handed over the documents. The clerk stamped the papers. "Congratulations," she said. "You're now the legal owner of 300 acres on County Road 12. I smiled. "Thank you." Next, I needed to deal with the house. The house itself wasn't part of the TOD deed. Technically, it did go to Karen under the will. But the house was on my land, which meant Karen was now living in a structure on property she didn't own. I called my lawyer, a sharp woman named Angela who specialized in estate law. "Angela," I said, "I need to evict someone from my property. Is there a lease?" "No." "Then you can file for an unlawful detainer. Give them notice to vacate. If they don't leave, the sheriff removes them." "How long does that take?" "In Kansas?" "About 30 days if they fight it. Faster if they don't." "Do it," I said. Angela drafted the notice. I had it served the next day. A process server drove out to the farmhouse and handed Karen the papers. I wasn't there, but Angela told me what happened. Karen opened the door, saw the papers, and started screaming. She called the process server a liar. She said I didn't own anything. She said she was calling her lawyer. "Good," I told Angela. "Let her call." Karen did call a lawyer. A cheap one from Wichita who didn't specialize in property law. He looked at the TD deed and told her the truth. The land was mine. The will didn't matter. Karen tried to argue. She claimed the deed was forged. She claimed my father wasn't mentally competent when he filed it. But the deed had been filed 3 months before his stroke. He had gone to the county office himself. The clerk remembered him. There was a notarized signature. There was video footage from the courthouse security camera. Karen had no case. Her lawyer told her to vacate the property. She refused. So I filed for the sheriff to remove her. The court date was set for 3 weeks out. In the meantime, I started making other calls. I called the bank that held my father's savings account. "I need to know who the beneficiary is on account number 4782. The banker checked. "The beneficiary is listed as Karen Hoffman." "And when was that designation made?" "It looks like 2 months ago." 2 months ago. Right around the same time as the fake will. I asked for copies of the paperwork. When it arrived, I saw my father's signature again. The same too smooth handwriting. The same forgery. I reported it to the bank's fraud department. They froze the account pending investigation. Karen tried to withdraw the money the next day. She was told the account was locked. She screamed at the teller. Security escorted her out. I also called the insurance company that held my father's life insurance policy. Same story. The beneficiary changed 2 months ago. Same forged signature. I reported that too. Within a week, Karen had no access to any money. The house she was living in was on land she didn't own. The accounts she thought were hers were frozen. She was trapped. And I was just getting started. I drove out to the farm one afternoon. I parked at the end of the driveway and walked up to the fence line. I didn't go onto the property. I didn't need to. I just stood there, looking at the house I grew up in. Karen saw me from the window. She came storming out. "Get off my property," she screamed. "It's not your property," I said calmly. "It's mine. You're trespassing. I have a will. You have a piece of paper. I have a deed." Her face went red. "You can't do this. Walter wouldn't have wanted this." I looked at her. Really looked at her. This woman who had made my childhood miserable. Who had treated me like hired help. Who had abandoned me on a highway 3 hours after burying my father. "You're right," I said. "He wouldn't have wanted this. He would have wanted you to treat me like family. But you didn't. So now you get to see what happens when you bet everything on a forged will." I turned and walked back to my car. Behind me, Karen was screaming something about lawyers and justice. I didn't listen. I got in my car and drove away. The eviction hearing was on a Thursday morning. I wore a navy suit. I brought Angela. I brought all my documents, the transfer on death deed, the county records, the video footage from the courthouse, the death certificate. Karen showed up in jeans and a t-shirt. Her lawyer looked exhausted. Jason and Brittany sat in the back row, looking uncomfortable. The judge read through the case. He looked at the TD deed. He looked at the will Karen had submitted. He looked at the timeline. "Mrs. Hoffman," he said to Karen, "do you have any legal claim to the land at County Road 12? "My husband left it to me," Karen said. "According to this deed, your husband transferred the land to his daughter before his death. The transfer was automatic upon death. The will is irrelevant to real property with a TOD designation. But, do you have evidence that this deed is fraudulent?" Karen's lawyer shuffled his papers. "Your Honor, we believe Mr. Hoffman was not of sound mind. The deed was filed 3 months before his stroke. Do you have medical evidence that he was incompetent at that time?" Silence. "I didn't think so." The judge stamped the order. "Ms. Hoffman is the legal owner. Mrs. Hoffman, you have 14 days to vacate the premises. If you are not gone by that date, the sheriff will remove you." Karen stood up. "This isn't fair." The judge looked at her over his glasses. "Fair or not, it's the law. The court is adjourned." I walked out of the courthouse. Angela shook my hand. "Congratulations," she said. "You just inherited a farm." "Thanks," I said. Karen came out a few minutes later. She saw me standing by my car. She walked over, her face twisted with rage. "You're going to regret this," she hissed. "No," I said. "I'm really not. He was my husband. I loved him." I laughed. It was a short, bitter sound. "You loved his money. You loved his land. You never loved him. And you did." "I called him every Sunday for 14 years, I said quietly. "Even when you made it clear I wasn't welcome. Even when he didn't say much. I called. Because he was my father. And you took him from me the day you married him." Karen didn't have an answer for that. She just turned and walked away. 14 days later, the sheriff showed up at the farm. Karen, Jason, and Brittany were loading boxes into a U-Haul. They had rented an apartment in Wichita. It was small. It was cheap. It was all they could afford. I didn't go to watch. I didn't need to. Angela texted me when it was done. "They're out. Property is yours." I drove out to the farm the next day. I walked through the house. It was empty. They had taken everything, even things that weren't theirs. Family photos. My mother's dishes. My father's tools. I didn't care. Those were just things. I walked out to the back porch and looked at the fields. The wheat was tall, golden in the late afternoon sun. The wind moved through it like water. This was mine now. Not because of money. Not because of a will. Because my father, in his quiet, unspoken way, had made sure I would be okay. I sat down on the porch steps and finally let myself cry. The bank investigation concluded 2 weeks later. The signature on the beneficiary change was a forgery. Karen had done it herself, using a sample of my father's writing from an old check. She wasn't subtle. She wasn't good at it. The bank refunded the account to the estate. Since I was the sole heir under the real will, which had been filed at the same time as the TOD deed, the money came to me. It was $47,000. Not a fortune, but enough. The insurance company reached the same conclusion. Another $100,000. Karen was charged with fraud and forgery. She pleaded guilty to avoid jail time. She got probation, a fine, and a permanent record. Jason and Brittany stopped speaking to me. I didn't lose sleep over it. I sold most of the farm equipment. I kept the land. I leased it to a neighboring farmer who had always been kind to my father. He paid me rent every quarter. I moved back to Kansas City. I kept my job. I kept my quiet life. But once a month, I drive out to Harper County. I park at the end of the driveway and walk the fence line. I check the wheat. I watch the sky. And every time I stand there, I think about that moment on Route 47. I think about the sound of gravel under my shoes. I think about how they left me there, thinking I was nothing. They were wrong. I wasn't nothing. I was my father's daughter. And he made sure I would never be left on the side of the road again. Karen calls sometimes. The number shows up on my phone. I never answer. There's nothing left to say. She made a choice that day. She chose cruelty. She chose to abandon me in the heat and the dust because she thought I had no power. But the power isn't loud. Power doesn't scream. Power is a transfer on death deed filed 3 months before you die. Power is a daughter who calls every Sunday. Power is knowing when to stay quiet and when to let the law do the talking. They thought they were dumping dead weight. They didn't realize they were cutting their own lifeline. If you've ever been underestimated, if you've ever been left behind, if you've ever been told you don't matter, stay quiet. Stay smart. And when the moment comes, make sure they regret every word. Drop a comment and let me know your story. Have you ever had someone underestimate you and lived to regret it? I read every single comment. And if this story hit home, hit that subscribe button. We're building something here. A community of people who know that the quiet ones are the dangerous ones. Thanks for listening. I'll see you in the next one.